This video is going to be a pretty vulnerable one on my end because I'm going to be revealing why I fired my social media marketing agency team many times over at this point, and the mistakes that I made and the lessons that I learned from the whole process that I'm going to be sharing with you in this video have taken me a lot of time, energy, money, sweat and tears to gather. And I'm sharing all in this video, taking you back in time, sharing with you some of the hiring decisions that I made, why I fired the people that I fired in the past. So by the end of the video, you can hire an A player for your team and you don't have to make any of the mistakes that I've made throughout the years. So let's get right into it. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to be jumping on my computer and sharing with you the architecture that you should have for your social media marketing agency. And I'm going to show you that so that you see why I hired the people that I hired and why I fired the people that I fired. All right, so here we are inside my computer. And look, the architecture for a social media marketing agency is pretty simple, right? You've got you as the CEO, and guys, excuse my writing. Usually I do this on I don't know. Usually I do this using a mouse, but now in terms of roles, there's a lot of stuff that you as a CEO have to do, right? A lot of people think, well, if my media buying is doing the media buying, right? It's buying the ads, the Facebook ads or the Google ads, whatever you offer, right? It's doing the Facebook ads for the clients, is writing the copy, is, for example, optimizing the ads, etc., etc. If the media buyer is doing this, what am I doing? I could make a whole video on this, and I've spoken about this on my channel previously, but you as the CEO, you're creating systems, you're creating processes, you're creating an incredible environment where this media buyer can thrive in the first place. You're signing the clients, you're doing a bunch of the communication with the clients. The media buyer also does quite a bit of communication. So it's not like you as the CEO just kind of lay back and not do anything. Obviously, it's pretty hands-off, which is the cool thing about the agency model. And as you start scaling, you can have it even more hands-off. And especially if you have an automated sales funnel like the one I talk about in my channel, the sales are pretty much on autopilot, right? So anyways, essentially you've got a media buyer, right? When you start. Now, as you scale, maybe past the 10K a month mark, is you can actually bring on a copywriter, okay? So this copywriter will actually help the media buyer, okay, with the copy for a bunch of the clients, right? So the media buyer should be doing the copy, okay? But a media buyer is great at media buying and a copywriter is great at copywriting. That's one of the things that I've found as I've started scaling, right? And so this media buying position, once you're past the 10K month mark, that can be a cool addition, okay? In this video, we're gonna focus on this person right here. Now, as you start scaling, you can also bring on another media buyer, okay? So you can descale and fire a bunch of clients and just keep one media buyer and clients that pay you more, or you can bring on another media buyer, bring on a bit more complexity, but bring the total revenue up, okay? Maybe the profit comes out to the same as if you had less clients, but it really depends what type of entrepreneur you are, okay? Again, for this video, I'm gonna be focusing on this media buyer right here, which should be your first hire, okay? This really is the first hire that you should focus on, this media buyer right here, so you can delegate much of the service delivery, so you can focus on revenue generating activities, okay? Activities that make you money, sales, for example, building systems, for example, that allow you to scale things, right? Building processes so that the media buyers can thrive and your team members can thrive. The list goes on and on and on, okay? So that is a bit about the architecture. Now that we know this, getting into my hiring decision. So going back in time, my first hiring decision, one of the things that I'll give myself credit for is that I always saw the massive value and the massive importance of hiring this first person, right? Because this person carries a massive load and is crucial and vital to the success of your agency. Of course, you're responsible for everything at the end of the day, right? But if you don't have a good person, then your clients are not going to stay as long. You're not going to have a peace of mind that you would with a media buyer that can just handle things well. And the list goes on and on and on, right? And so I saw the importance of the media buyer, and that's when I started piecing together an incredible hiring process, 3-step hiring process that I also talk about on my mentorship. Anyway, so what was wrong with this person? Now, there were some goods. There's no doubt about that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have hired this person over, 100 plus applicants that I looked at. But what was wrong with this person that I didn't realize at that point just because I didn't have the perspective? I call these types of people the lazy genius. Now, genius is probably a pretty big word, but this guy was good at his craft, right? The only problem was, first of all, that he was lazy. So what I did for this first hire is I optimized for experience, which is one of the things that I recommend you do, right? That first hire, you should optimize for experience. Why? Because it's one thing that you don't have as much of, right? So these people can fill in that experience because they've done media buyer for a number of years at this point. Okay, so it's important that you optimize for that experience. But what I kind of neglected was the hunger side of things, right? So I neglected the hunger, and this person was probably a 3 out of 10 when it came to hunger, right? It didn't become apparently clear during the hiring process, and that's why, as I tweaked and optimized the hiring process, I made sure that I asked questions so that that hunger would come up, and so that the people who weren't hungry, I could tell very quickly, right? But his routines were off. He would wake up late, and I would often have to chase him for communication. Have you answered the client? Have you sent the client this? Have you done this, right? He wasn't proactive in communication, and it was really, really annoying, and it definitely slowed my growth. The second problem with this person, with the lazy genius, is that for this first hire, I looked for someone who was similar to me. And this is a massive, massive mistake that I see so many entrepreneurs make, unfortunately. And that is, they looked for someone unconsciously even, right? They gravitate towards people that are similar to them. They start looking for people, and all of a sudden, maybe someone is super, extroverted, they're entrepreneurial as well, they're confident, right? And it's just like them, right? And so they unconsciously gravitate towards these personalities because we tend to resonate with people that are similar to us, right? And that, when it comes to hiring, is a massive, massive problem. You want to make sure that you put your own personality needs aside, so you can make a decision on who's the best person for this specific role. And so what happened to me is I unconsciously looked for someone who was an entrepreneur. And so guess what I got? I got an entrepreneur. I got someone who had run dropshipping stores, but he never really felt like a freelancer or a contractor. So it was really hard for him to get into the mindset of being that person. And the final problem with the lazy genius is that he basically thought he could get away without the professional side of things, right? And that, for me, I realized that is quite an important thing, especially if you're signing these big clients, right? This, big US, UK, whatever they're based, right? But these big brands who are making multi millions a year, right? And they're particularly used to the traditional agency model where everything is kind of flashy and maybe they have a fancy office, etc., etc. And so although when they hire us, they know what they get, they don't get the fancy office, right? I do believe that there's a certain level of professionalism that is incredibly important. It just comes to show that you actually care, right? And so showing up to calls where the background is not messy, right? Looking for a background that is at least half professional, right? Putting on a nice t-shirt or a nice shirt, whatever you're comfortable in, but not a tank top, right? And so oftentimes this lazy genius would wear a tank top to calls, right? Maybe his bed was in the back unmade, and I obviously confronted him and told him about it, right? And he changed. He would put on a blazer on top of his tank top, but there wasn't consistency, and you could see that that was one of the things that he just neglected in his personal life, and it translated into his professional life. And that's one of the things that I realized was a pretty big important thing for me. I wanted my team members to be professional so that I could be comfortable leaving them on, for example, a call with the client just completely alone, because I knew that would give me a complete different peace of mind. So that's a bit about my first hiring experience and the mistake that I made. Now onto the second person, because oh boy, you're in for a treat. Well, the second person that I had to hire, this wasn't a great hiring decision either, but I learned a lot from it, and it's something that you must be aware of. And we'll call this person the wannabe entrepreneur. This is the type of person that at first, they might even tell you they're not interested in starting an agency. They might even tell you that they're not interested in the entrepreneurial journey, but in reality, they've got their eyes set on starting their own thing. I definitely learned a few lessons from that first hire. This guy was definitely more composed, more professional. Communication was just pretty much on point. And, all in all, I felt comfortable with this person. However, it kind of ended abruptly, because as soon as, we started scaling aggressively, he basically just said, let me just try and start my agency. Probably not a great idea for him, given that he had been doing this for like 7-8 years. And so that's what you've mastered. And that's what you can really monetize and take to a whole new level, instead of jumping ship and moving on to a new thing where you're starting from scratch. But hey ho, different strokes for different folks. One of the things I do want to address, however, is a lot of people may be thinking, well, this is probably a very usual thing, right? Like, why, if they can make more with an agency, why don't just freelancers and contractors run their own agency instead of working for us? I get where you're coming from, but it doesn't have much logic. Most contractors just love what they do, and they love doing one single thing, whether that's Facebook ads, Google ads, whatever it is, right? They don't want the burden of having a team. They don't want the burden and the struggle of getting no's by, clients and brands, right? And that is something that as entrepreneurs, we put on our shoulders. We put that greater burden on our shoulders for a greater reward. And we love this game, right? But most freelancers, most contractors, they are that because they just love doing that one single thing and getting paid for it. So that was the second person, something to be aware of. I should have seen it coming because this person was very much into entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. However, I still hadn't learned fully from my first hire, and unconsciously I was seeking someone that was in some ways similar to me. I'd learned a little bit, but I hadn't implemented that lesson fully. So that was the second person that I hired and that I fired. Now onto the third person, because this one is a juicy one. Oh boy, the third mistake that I made with my media buyers that turned into me having to fire this person as well. And you can learn a lot from this team member situation. But before I get into it, if you've gotten to this point of the video, probably means you're finding a bit of value out of it. And if you are, I'd really appreciate if you just smash that like button, helps a lot with the algorithm, the whole channel. I'd really appreciate it. Go do it right now. I think it's here. Go do it right now. Cool, done it. All right, let's get back into the video. So this third person, look, it started out very well, right? And really on the surface, there's really no problem with this hire, right? The problem only becomes clear as you start growing aggressively fast. However, I still think that it's incredibly vital that you understand this right now, because if you don't, as you grow, you're gonna attract this type of people, you're gonna train them up, you're gonna invest a bunch of time, energy, money into them, and then all of a sudden, it's gonna turn out to not be a good fit. And yes, you can see that I have a bit of a trauma coming out at this point, but let's get right into this third person, which I call the different stage media buyer. This person is just at a different stage of their life, okay? And this applies for a media buyer, but really for any person that you're bringing into the team. Now, this person was a family man. He had a family, he had kids, and there's no problem with that. I'm a family man. Although I don't have a family, I plan on ideally having a big family one day. The problem, however, arises when, since this person is at a different stage of their life, they're looking for different things. Their motivations are different. What they're looking to get out of that job is very different. And so that is why it's incredibly vital to have the conversation early on with a team member. What do you want out of this job? Do you want security? Do you want a lot of money? Do you want validation? Do you want social proof, right? And for a lot of people, it may be very different, right? You might think, well, people just want money, right? Not always. A lot of people want to feel secure. A lot of people want to have a lot of money. Yes, they want to make a lot of money, but a lot of people want to feel like they have an impact in the world. So not everyone wants to just have money, right? And so in this particular case, the visions were a bit misaligned. And the reason why that was is because he had other priorities, right? And that is completely fine. And it may be completely fine for a different type of business. But what I found as a fast growing startup, right, is that I needed people in the team to be on a similar vision as I was. Maybe they've got a little chip on their shoulder. Maybe they're still young and want to prove their worth. Maybe they still want to build, their wealth, right? Because they're young, etc., etc. I'm not saying age plays a massive role, but I just found that in this particular case, it wasn't so much the age, right? It was just that in this particular case, the age and the life setup led to a misalignment in vision, values, and just motivation in general. All right, that brings this video to a close. A pretty vulnerable one, at least, my end, I felt it was pretty vulnerable, sharing why I fired my social media marketing agency team many times over. It's not something to brag about, but what I can brag about is having been in the trenches, right? And having learned a lot by making mistakes, by having wins as well, and by learning a lot from the process. And needless to say, I'm super grateful for everyone that has played a role in my journey and my company and my growth, right? And all the lessons that I shared with you in this video have helped me tremendously to create what I consider now probably one of the best teams in the online space. Like literally hands down in all areas, I've got 8 players. And that sometimes takes time. I've got students who their first hire is the hire that they stay with for years on end, and it's a great hire. But I've also got students who hire that first person, and this person ends up being the DA player, and they stay on with them for ages. So there's definitely both cases. It's just life, and life is a learning process. So we live and we learn. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to drop a massive thumbs up. And the final thing I want to say is when it comes to the hiring process that I mentioned early on in this video, that is just a tiny little bit, tip of the iceberg of what I cover in my mentorship program. For example, the hiring process, I literally give you my 3 step-by-step hiring process, the hands-on exercises to get these media buyers to do so that ultimately you find an A player, how to incentivize these people so that they become a vital part of your success, and so much more. So if you're interested in starting or growing your e-com agency, there's going to be a link down below in this video. You can go ahead and apply. We can see if you're a good fit. And if you are, we can move forward. If not, no hard feelings. This is definitely not for everyone. But with that being said, hope everything's going well in your journey, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.